Now let's begin creating the tubing from these paths. To do that, we're going to want to look at this panel here. Let me right click here, click join areas, and join this window to get rid of that extra image window. And then this object data properties, when we select one of the paths, is what we're going to use to create a tube from this. We can come down here to geometry, and under the bevel section, the depth here, if we click and drag on this, you can see it creates that tube. And that's the kind of thing we want. But we're going to have to adjust some settings here. First of all, I'm in wireframe mode. I've hit Z and gone to wireframe. And in doing so, you can see what it would look like if we converted this path and tube to polygons, to a mesh. And that would just be a lot of polygons. There's a lot of little tiny polygons in there that we really don't need. So we can begin adjusting the settings to get it down to a more reasonable amount. First of all, this resolution preview, this, if we take this down, you can see it reduces the number of cross edges to the number of points in the path. So each one of these cross sections here is a point in that path that we created. Now, if we bring this up a bit, maybe up to, well, there's still quite a lot in here. Maybe let's take this down to 3. And if we hit the Z key and go to solid mode, we can kind of see that we're still getting a relatively smooth surface there. If we take it all the way down to 1, you can see we get it kind of choppy, kind of blocky here. So I think probably 3 is pretty good. Let's try that. And then this other setting down here, this resolution under the bevel, what that does is it changes the amount of edges around the tube. So currently, if we take it down to 0, you can see that it just becomes a square. It really isn't a tube anymore. So we don't want that. Let's increase this a little bit now. Let's just click on the arrow, and that's 1, 2. I'm going to go over to solid, and let's take a look at this. And maybe let's try 3. Yeah, so you can see the blockiness on the ends, but with it smooth like this, it looks pretty good. So I think that's what we want from the resolution, here under the bevel and here on this preview U. All right, so we've got 3 and 3 here, and the depth now, we need to figure out how big this needs to be around to match the image. So I'm going to press the Z key and go back to wireframe, and we need it to come down like this. So I'm going to click and drag on the depth field and bring this down until it's just about the right size here. And we've got it now, that's 0.1 here in the depth field. And that looks pretty good, I think. Yeah, I think we could go with that. And the problem is now that we have that, it's still a little bit blocky here. I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to take this to 4. See if that helps just a little bit. Okay. So 4 and 3 now on our resolution and 0.1 for our depth. Now the problem is going to be, let me hit the N key on the keyboard to bring up this side panel here. Now the problem is going to be our scale is off from one object to another, from one path to another. So this is 0.13. This here is 0.14. This one 0.14. This one is 0.15. So they're not too far off, but this one here is pretty far off. This one is 0.062. And what I should have done, but this is a good lesson to learn here, and the fix could be instructive, I think. So what the issue is going to be is each of these tubes, if we set them at 0.1 here, is going to be a slightly different size because the scale is slightly different. Blender looks at the scale for objects to run a lot of tools and for a lot of settings. So for this kind of setting here, it's doing it in relation to the scale. It's seeing this as the root scale 1.0. So for each one of these, it's going to be a little bit different. It might not be too bad for all of these, but for this one, we're going to have to do something to kind of fix it. So let's keep going and we'll deal with that as we get to it. So for this one, let's take the preview U resolution down to 4. And we'll take the resolution here under bevel down to 3. And for the depth, we put 0.1 on that other one. So let's try 0.1 here. And look at that. It's just a little bit bigger, isn't it? Here, from here to here. So yeah, it's a little bit bigger. What we can do is try like 0.09. Yeah, 0.085. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me in terms of similar sizes. Well, maybe we could take it back up to 0.09. Let me try that. 0.09. Yeah, so these two now look pretty similar. Okay, so how about this one here? This one I feel like is a little bit bigger than the others. So we may be able to go with 0.1 on this one. But let's go up to our preview U, type in 4 here, 3 down here, and let's type in 0.1 here. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's a little bit bigger than those. I think that'll be fine. And this one too, I think, is a similar size. So let's just take this one. We'll take this up here, our preview U resolution to 4. Take this resolution to 3, and we'll type in 0.1 here. All right, what do we think? Yeah, I think those are pretty good. But now let's try this one here. What happens if we give this the same setting? 4 here, 3 down here, and let's type in 0.1 here. Yeah, take a look at that. See how that's not quite right? So what's the deal? Well, the deal is, as I said, this scale is a little bit off or a little bit different than the rest of these. So what we can do, let's say this one is 0.14, 0.13, 0.14. So let's say 0.14. What we can do is just take this scale, hit the S key, scale it up to 0.14-ish, right? About like that. And then if we tab into edit mode and hit the A key to select everything, and then hit the S key and scale back in, look at what happens. It stays at that thickness because it's doing it in relationship to the scale in object mode, not how big it is in edit mode, right? So what this tells us is in scaling these down when we were putting them in place, it would have been a good idea to do it in edit mode so that we don't change the scale in object mode. But it's not a tragedy. We can make it work. I'm going to hit the S key and scale this down just a little bit more like this. And I feel like I want it to be a little bit smaller. So let's take this down to 0.09, something like that. And maybe even, let's try 0.08, 0.085. Let's do that. There we go. So it kind of inserts into this one. All right, so now I think also I need a little bit of a curve. You can see how there's just a little bit of a curve here. Let's do that. Let's hit the 7 key and go to the top view. Let's tab into edit mode. Now if I take this point right here in the center and move it up, that's not bad, but these are kind of getting in the way and making it not curve exactly the way I want. But it's not bad. I mean, I could move them to here and that looks pretty good. But another way to also do this is the fewer points you have, the smoother the curve. So if I selected these two and then just hit delete, I could dissolve these vertices while keeping the segments. Click here. Now it's just trying to curve from this point to this point, and now I can move this back and forth and I get a nice curve with it. So all I really need is something I think about like this. Let's try that. And that's the beauty of keeping it with a path for now. Instead of converting it to polygons immediately, you still have the ability to give it that nice curve when it's still a path. Now also, let me tab into edit mode and hit the 3 key, and I want to just bring this up. I'll hit G, and I just want to bring this up so it's in line with this piece right here. There we go. So that's nice. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, so now that we have these, I want to mirror this piece and this piece over to the other side. Everything else is in the center, but these two need to be mirrored. But before we can do that, we need to convert them to polygons. As we've seen, if I hit the tab key and go to edit mode, we can still see these points for the path. We need to convert it to polygons. So I'm just going to select this and then shift click all of these because we can do it all at once. And then I'll right click, go to convert, and convert to a mesh. And there we go. Now, look at this. When I tab into edit mode, we can see the polygons for each of the objects. So I'll deselect everything and then select one and hit the tab key, and we can see now we actually have polygons. And with the polygons, we can now mirror these over. We wouldn't have been able to do this with the paths. So let's go over to our modifiers panel, and in here we have a mirror modifier, but it's going to mirror around that origin of the object. And currently that's not where we want it. We want to mirror around the center of the grid. So currently the 3D cursor is there. We can press Shift S1 if it isn't and get it into the center of the grid. And then to move this object origin, let's come up here to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. Now when we apply our mirror modifier, it mirrors around this point, but it does it in a really wonky way. And the problem is our rotation up here. We need to zero out this rotation so it can mirror across the x-axis here, because we have the x-axis chosen here, but it's actually mirroring more in the z-axis because of all this rotation. So to apply our rotation, we can press Control A and apply the rotation. And there we go. There's the other side. That's good. All right, let's do that with this one here. Let's move the object origin, Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And then let's come over here and go to Add Modifier, Mirror. Now we have the same kind of wonky problem because we have rotation over here. So let's apply that rotation, Control A, and apply the rotation there. And there we go. Now we've got the basic outline of our chassis. And from here, we can begin adding the different parts that connect to this. And it's going to give us a better sense of the relationship between each of the objects.